Thank you all for coming to the Black Rock Historical Society. Thank you to our members, and if you're not a member, please consider joining. I want to introduce today's speaker, Tim Herzog. As its founder and manager, Tim is an award-winning brewer with over 20 years experience.
40.
40?
Sorry. I am as old as I look.
In 2000, Tim opened the Flying Bison Brewing Company right here in Riverside, at 491 Ontario Street, where it is the first standalone brewery to operate in Buffalo since Iroquois Brewing closed in 1972. If you don't know, the name Flying Bison celebrates the area's rich history of aviation manufacturing, in particular the Curtiss Wright Corporation, which operated plants right here in northwest Buffalo. In 2014, Flying Bison moved to the Hydraulics District at 840 Seneca Street, where Tim's brewery, beer hall, and beer garden are a must-visit destination. Not surprising that Tim has agreed to join us this evening. Tim is a selfless advocate and strong supporter of numerous charitable causes and community events, such as Real Men Wear Pink. I miss your mustache.
It's getting dyed on Monday.
Okay.
I hit the goal and they moved it $500 and I hit it again.
Awesome.
So if you donated, thank you very much.
Crisis Services Men Who Cook, I've seen Tim there as well. Music is Art, and several Erie County Bicentennial events, just to name a few. Please welcome Tim Herzog.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. I've got some PowerPoint slides to kind of guide you through our history of who we are, Flying Bison. When I say we, nobody does anything alone. Okay, I have lots of friends. An incredibly patient wife who really should have killed me a long time ago. So I keep my insurance really low. That's helped me a lot. My older son is the head brewer and kind of logistics master at Flying Bison, and I got lots and lots of friends. And so you'll kind of get a feel for that, I hope, as we go along. So besides being the last word in the dictionary, Zymurgy means the art and science of making beer. And what I really like about brewing, and I've been doing it for 40 years, so evidently I like it. So tomorrow we're going to tap a cask of English beer that I made 2.5 weeks ago. So, I mean, to this day, I'm still brewing, even though most of my stuff is office stuff now. The kids don't let me play with the big toys. So this is something that's important. What beer is made of? Malted barley, which is grain. And so you've all seen our storied collection of grain silos. They weren't put here for General Mills. Right? There were 35 breweries over time in the city of Buffalo, with the boundaries of the city of Buffalo being Hurdle Avenue to South Park Avenue. Okay? What is now UB was a farm. So that wasn't in the city of Buffalo. So when you think about that space, Buffalo is a pretty compact city. To have 35 breweries in that space of various sizes, from the size of this room up to Simon Brewing Company, which is 4 buildings, to Lang's Brewery, which was knocked down to build Roswell Park. You know, so urban renewal is not always our friend, but there were 35 breweries, but there also were 1 million people living within that space. So when you're stuck on the 33 or the 198 and going, oh, the traffic is brutal. Imagine if there was 1 million people in that space. That's why there were 35 breweries needed. There was no Budweiser being imported, no Guinness coming from Ireland. If you drank beer in Buffalo, you were drinking beer that was made in Buffalo. And that grain was stored in those silos. And you knew somebody that worked at a brewery. And that's just some of the things that I really like about it. Hops are flowers. They look like little green pine cones. And they grow on a plant that grows to about 22 to 24 feet in height. It comes up out of the ground in March, and by early to mid-September, with global warming, we are now harvesting hops in September rather than in October. Water, we live on 2/5 of all the world's fresh water. You're gonna water your garden, you're gonna make beer. It's your choice. Yeast is very important, of course, that's what makes it all go. So you all know where this is. Anybody recognize it? It's on the 190? Right, so this is the Erie Canal, which is now the 190 Expressway. And the way that they filled in the canal was they filled it with all the garbage from the city for about 3 years. And they dug the canal out farther, or east more. Canada's on our west. Anyway, very confusing though. It used to say Agway on this building. Now do you recognize it? So that was one of the malt houses. There's an architectural firm that bought one. If you've ever been to Flying Bison Tap Room, you look out the front window, there's a gray kind of a garage looking building across the street. And if you look over the top of it, you can see a sign that says Buffalo Malting. That was the most recent name of that company was Buffalo Malting Company, and they malted grain for the brewing industry. They malted barley for brewers. It's now an architectural firm, and it is one of my favorite renewal stories in the city of Buffalo. If you ever get a chance to go, you absolutely must, and see what these guys did. They didn't get Buffalo Billion, they didn't get free cash from anywhere. They did it on their own, and I just love people like that. So Jerry Young, it's Young and Wright Architects. Jerry Young was over to pick up a keg of beer for, he's got a Bills bus and there's a game, and you know how that goes. So Buffalo Malting on Elk Street. Curtis was on Niagara Street. That's the old Agway building. Perot Malting is part of what's called Silo City. Meyer Malting was on Niagara Street. That's the building that said Schaefer on it. A lot of people thought that was a brewery. That was a malt house. Kleinschmidt's was on Pratt Street, and that was actually the malting company for Iroquois Brewing. So this is what it looks like. This is the grain. These are the little kernels that help us make our magic. And from very pale Pilsner malt, we have a Pilsner to sample a little later, to a Karamunic. And this, actually, the kernel should be a little darker to make a liquid that color. So I'm always confused when people say, oh, I don't like dark beer. It's just, you take a lot of this and a little of this. It's the same. It's like, oh, I don't like toast. It's brown. Okay, sure. However that works for you. Hops. The flowers are actually these little bright green little buds there. This is in 2009 when there was supposed to be a world hop shortage. So overnight the price went from about $1.75 to $2 a pound up to $19 a pound. This hop field had already been harvested. Those were going to get plowed under because the farmer just couldn't sell these. He was all sold out. Everybody had everything they needed. This is in Belgium in 2009. So much for the world hop shortage. So don't believe everything you read. New York State figures in world brewing in a big way. In 1916, New York State exported more hops out to the world than Great Britain did. And everybody knows, a lot of people know, that Great Britain grows hops, grows barley, sells hops, sells barley, but New York State shipped more out of New York State than Great Britain did. So that I found that really interesting. And where the hops were grown was kind of Ithaca, Cooperstown area down to Poughkeepsie, northern Albany. That's where the hop belt was. Where we are was more the grain belt. Along the canal, anywhere that you see corn, summer wheat being grown now on farms, barley was grown in the early 1900s. There's a small hop farm in Eden, and if you had any of our EC 200 Pilsner, which we're going to have tonight, we had a case set aside for Jason, who's Mark Polenkar's community relations guy. He's the one who dragged me into the EC, kicking and screaming. We've had an awful lot of fun with the EC 200 project. So we're going to do a bunch more. We hope to do another batch of EC 200 in the spring and some fun events over the course of the winter into the spring. So we've got 5 more months of EC 200, Erie County 200th anniversary events coming up. But Eden is the only hop farm in Erie County. It's called East Prairie Hop Farm. And the guy that owns it, Gary Kwiatkowski, is also a docent at the Darwin Martin House. So if you've been to the Bricks and Brews event over there, Gary's the guy who sets up that beer festival. It's the single biggest fundraiser that they have for Darwin Martin House, other than M&T Bank donating money. So that's, some of his hops are in this beer. That's a giant hop cone. So that's my hand. So imagine how big that hop cone is. They're usually about this big. So again, 2009, and there wasn't a shortage. The chemistry of the water here is brilliant for brewing beer. We don't have any sulfur, we don't have any iron. These are things that will kill your yeast and slow the production of your beer. So we have nice, clean, pure water that's low in hard mineral content. Not a lot of magnesium, not a lot of copper, on and on and on. So that's why the water around here is so good for making beer. So imagine in the early 1900s, you're living at the corner of fresh water, local hops, and local grain. Why wouldn't you make beer? So yeast, quickly, there's two primary families of yeast. Ale yeast, which works at slightly warmer temperatures. Lager yeast that works at slightly cooler temperatures. Lager takes longer to ferment. That's really, people will say, oh, I don't like ale, it's thick, it's dark, it's heavy, or I don't like lager, it's thick, it's dark, it's heavy. Sure, you can say that about lager and you can say that about ale. You can also say that there are lagers that are light and bright and spritzy, and there are ales that are light and bright and spritzy, and on and on and on. So anything you can say about ale, you can say about lager. Anything you can say about lager, you can say about ale, except that lager takes longer to ferment out. Because it ferments a little cooler, so it ferments a little slower. That's really it. Brewing, this is the brew house at the brewery. This is actually my son Colin. We've had that brew house since we were over on Ontario Street. So if you ever were in over there, we're still using it. It still works great. And it was built locally, just on the other side of the border. It was built in Niagara Falls, Ontario. A company called Creveller. I don't know who this guy is. Fermenters. So the cones on the bottom, once fermentation is done and you crank the refrigeration, this is refrigeration fluid. We put red food coloring in it so that we can see it if it spills on the floor, because it's propylene glycol, so it's kind of oily. It can be slippery. So it's a slip and fall hazard. So to put a little bit of dye in it, if there's a puddle in it, you can see it and avoid it. If it's just water, big deal. Our feet get wet all the time. So the cone on the bottom, when you chill that tank, the yeast wants to fall fast, and it falls into that cone where you can collect it and either dump it or wash it and save it and brew another batch of beer with it. Packaging, we do bottles, kegs, cans, and casks. On almost every Friday, all year round, we do a cask and pull it through a British style beer engine, and it's a style of beer that shows very well on that. And most people don't have an opportunity to have that, but in the time period that a lot of your collection is from, beer would be served that way. There wasn't a CO2 tank.
What's a cask compared to keg?
So it's a vessel that it's got two holes in it, where a keg has one. And a keg is a pressurized vessel. It's a stainless steel tank, if you will, and you push beer into it that's fully carbonated, and you push the beer out by using CO2 pressure to push down around kind of the outside edges, and the beer comes up a tube in the middle. All right, so that's a keg. A cask is a barrel, got one here, that you lay on its side, and there's two holes in it. So you know how a barrel, there's a hole kind of halfway up, all right, that's a bung. And then if you tip it on its side and you lay the barrel, imagine it's a hoop like this, there's a hole down here. So you drive the tap in here and you punch a little hole in the bung up here, and now the beer is going to fall out by gravity. Or if you put a tap in and you put it on an engine that's basically a hand water pump, and you pull it, and you're creating a suction, and a little bit of oxygen comes into that top hole, and the beer gets pulled out. So the beer is naturally carbonated in there, and there's no external gas used, so no extra CO2. And purists, someone you may have met before, think that that's an incredibly forthright way to serve beer. That it just, you taste the beer and nothing but the beer, and there's not that extra prickle of carbonation, there's not, which can be nice in certain styles. Like the Pilsner, carbonation is brilliant in Pilsner because it's a very delicate beer, so it brings those smells and flavors up to where they're available to you. But cask ales tend to be a little more malty, tend to have a little more savory hop kind of flavors and smells. So to have that pulled with a very delicate carbonation really shows well. Does that help? And just show up tomorrow at 3 o'clock and it will become incredibly plain to you. So cleanliness is not next to godliness in a brewery, it's in front of everything. You've got to be cleaner than a hospital or your brewery's going to close. There are different bacteria that can affect the flavor of beer. None of these will hurt you or kill you or anything else. They're just going to make your beer taste inconsistent, and people will stop buying your beer and you'll go out of business. Freshness, we are partnered with Try It Distributing. That's our beer truck. You may have seen it on the road. Talked a little bit about styles. So, these handsome guys in their Irish outfits. Anything you can say about an ale, you can say about a lager. Anything you can say about a lager, you can say about an ale. Light, bright, kind of spritzy carbonation. Light, bright, spritzy carbonation. Dark color malty, sharply hoppy, So, you get it kind of goes across. Pairings, foods. So, Prohibition started in 1919. Buffalo got a guy as its mayor who was the sales manager at the Kaltenberg Brewery? That is now an oil and grease plant on Bailey and Clinton. So when you drive by there, it's a big kind of blocky brick-looking building. And the guy's name was F.X. Schwab. He ran for mayor, and he ran on a platform of, I will not enforce prohibition. Guess what? He won. He's the guy, he's the last mayor to serve in the building that's now County Hall, that gray Gothic building that's kind of across from the Rath building. That was Buffalo City Hall at the time. He's the guy who secured the property, accepted the design, and started the construction of what is now City Hall, that Art Deco building that so nicely mirrors the train station. As stock market was crashing, prohibition was starting, and Buffalo started on some tough times. People say that when the car industry, the steel industry crashed in 1980, 84, that's when Buffalo really started to have hard times. It goes back to this. So let's go back to 1 million people living in the city. Let's go back to 35 breweries, all right? So you have malt houses. Well, you can't have breweries anymore, so they're closed. Hop farmers, sorry, you're done. The Teamsters Union started in Buffalo. Does anybody know that? Teamsters. Horse teams of horses pulling beer wagons. That's the start of the Teamsters Union. So the wagons that were built as drays for delivering beer, they're done. The coopers that made the wooden barrels, they're done. The guys that raised the horses, they're done. So the trickle-down effect of prohibition really heavily impacted the financial future of the city of Buffalo. That's when things really started coming undone. And then steel and cars and so on and so on. So we got a lot of kicks in the kneecaps, but prohibition was really the first big one in Buffalo. And then St. Lawrence Seaway, so the ships weren't coming here that used to come here, and on and on and on. So I want you to kind of remember a couple of numbers if you can. So we got 34 breweries in 1919, 2,150 bars, restaurants, saloons, places where you can go and sit down and have a drink. a martini, a beer, a glass of wine, whatever. 150 hotels and 95 little grocery store saloons, or what became the corner bars, that sort of thing. So we're looking at 22, let's say 2,400 places in the city of Buffalo. 1 million people, 2,400 places where you can go and get a drink. All right? So that's before Prohibition. So 1921, Mayor Schwab is elected. 1922, we're well in the throes of Prohibition. Look how many places we can get a drink now. So from 2,300 to 8,000. So Prohibition was very successful here. Really got people to stop drinking. Canada they tried beer prohibition for a little bit because they thought beer was for the dirty Irish people and those Germans who talked funny and things like that. They were very quick to release prohibition. Anybody ever been Crystal Beach? Peace Bridge was built during Prohibition. Let's see, Canada didn't have Prohibition, and the United States had Prohibition. So let's build a bridge to go over to Canada. Now, who built all those houses in Point Avenue? Goodyears, the Congers, the Cornells, the Knoxes, the money of Buffalo built summer homes in Canada where they could entertain. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. I'm sure it has nothing to do with Prohibition. So when Prohibition is repealed, 1933, the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms, which is now more accurately named, it's the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade. It's about the tax money. So when you buy a glass of beer or a 6-pack of beer, tax is paid 3 times. The brewers have to pay a federal excise tax that for every barrel of beer, I have to pay $7 to the federal government. I have to pay $6.50 to New York State, and then sales tax. So 3 taxes on beer. How about your car? You buy a $50,000 Mercedes-Benz, no tax. Buy a $450,000 home, mortgage tax. So the tax on beer, wine, spirits is regressive. The more you make, the more you're taxed. It's a disincentive.
So the beers that, let's say Budweiser, that might not be made in New York, and
that's every state. Every state pays excise tax, every state pays federal excise tax, state excise tax. You do not escape it. The state can set their own level. Small brewers were able to lobby the federal government, and I've been a small brewer for 21 years. I have lobbied Congress and the Senate and New York State Assembly and New York State Senate at least 5 times each over 21 years. Spent a lot of time off the road going, please stop killing me. The message finally got through. So last year, just before Trump left office, an omnibus bill was signed that, the previous year we had gotten a minor reduction in federal excise tax for small brewers under a certain size. Sam Adams is above that. He's over 2 million barrels of beer a year. This is under 200,000 barrels of beer a year, okay? We're 7,000 barrels, just to give you an idea of size. Okay? So they said, all right, for 1 year, we'll try it out, and if nobody jumps up and objects, the other way around. If nobody jumps up and says, hey, we have to continue this, you're done at the end of this year. The tax goes back up, and you pay it. So if you don't hear anything, you just start paying more money, all right? This bill got, I hate to say it, buried in a whole bunch of other things that got signed. It happens a lot. You'd be frightened at this stuff, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you like to sit on. There's stuff that you don't like that blows through at the end of the year because they haven't done anything all year. So they got to get a whole bunch of stuff signed. So they go, well, I got this done. Well, I got that done. Yeah, you got it done because it was in a stack of papers this thick. That's how it got done. So the brewery's lower rate of tax of it, we still have to pay it. So it was $12.50. It's now $7 for every barrel of beer times 7,000. That's federal excise tax. New York State is $6.50. It's been $6.50. They're not going anywhere. It's $6.50. There are other states that are more. There are other states that are less. But every state does it because that's the pig trough. That's, when you see marble in the courthouse and brass on the rails and the steps and the teak around the mayor's office, the congressman's office, beer is where that came from. So we had gotten to the point where there were no breweries in Buffalo. There were 49 breweries in the United States. The Buffalo Brew Pub opened in '86. They also owned Buffalo Brewing Company. They lasted just a few years. Pearl Street opened in '98. We opened in 2000. We were the first ones to distribute beer to bars and restaurants in that time. The last new brewing license was the Simon Brewing Company. When Bill Simon bought it from his in-laws, when his father-in-law passed away, he didn't think it was right to keep trading on the old man's name. So he went back and filed a whole new brewer's license for the property at Emsley and Broadway. Or William, I forget. But they're right around the corner from us. So Bill Simon the First, 1900. So Tim Herzog walks into City Hall in 1995 to try and start licensing this brewery. The people in City Hall are going, what? You want to build a, so we actually found the building we originally want to start in is now called the Phoenix Lofts. It was the old Phoenix Brewery on Washington and Virginia Street. And they couldn't, no, you can't zone this, you can't, because you're manufacturing, you can't. So there's a whole lot of you can't when you try and open a brewery, especially when you're the first one. Pearl Street is a restaurant, and they could make whatever kind of food they wanted to in the restaurant. Well, beer was considered food, it's soup. So, that was no big deal. Buffalo Brew Pub, no problem. But they didn't distribute off premises, and that was the difference. So if you make it and serve it on premises, you're a restaurant, this is just a food thing. And if you're going outside, now you're deeming alcohol. So you've got to be controlled. So we finally found the zoning card, and it had been written with a fountain pen, handwritten, in pretty old script, and the ink was now brown. It was so old. That's how long the zoning had been on that building. We finally found part of the building that a lot of the brewery part of the building had been knocked down. There was one part of the lager cellars that was still up, and that's where we were going to be, and that's how we got our zoning through on that building. We wound up not being able to do it. We wound up over here in Riverside, and it went way better. Lots of other people came behind us. There's still even more. There's 3 breweries in planning. One is supposed to open by the end of the year, and 2 more early next year. One in Bowmansville, kind of on the edge of Orchard Park. Lancaster, one in Orchard Park in the old VFW, and one on Main Street in Williamsville that's going to be tiny, tiny. It's in a building that's now a house, so I don't know how that's going to work out. Can you cue up the next one? So the next one is more about us personally, and I'll go through. If you have any questions as I'm going, just give me a yell. All right? Yes?
Are you the largest brewery in Buffalo?
No. Big Ditch is the largest brewery in Buffalo. They're in 7 other distributorships. We're in 2, and one of them is so bad I don't even consider them. But the way that the laws go in most states, and especially in New York State, is once you sign a contract with them, they sort of own your brand. You don't own it anymore, they do. So the one that we have, kind of Batavia to the Finger Lakes, is brutal. We'll send them 80 cases sometime this week. It's the 3rd shipment they've taken this year.
Are the restaurants, breweries taxed the same?
Yes. Yes.
They are.
Yes. but they don't have bottles to buy, cans to buy. Some of them don't even have kegs, they serve it directly out of tanks. So their costs are a great deal lower, and they're going straight to retail. So they buy the malted barley, the hops, the water, the yeast, they brew the beer and sell it at $6, $7 a pint. Where we're selling it for $8 or $9 a six pack, but Wegmans gets a cut of that, the distributor gets a cut of that, and I have to pay all the taxes out of that. So this is a picture of the brewery. It's kind of a wide angle shot. You can down here, lots and lots of tanks. The least expensive tank we have in there now, we paid $17,500 for. So times 13 fermenters, plus a brew house that was $74,000, plus hot water tank, plus cold water tanks, plus. So you can see that money goes away real quick in the brewery. So 1976, I discovered beer. I was 18 years old. Beer was allowed to be consumed by 18-year-olds. So where I went to high school in Rochester, there was a bowling alley just down the road. I could have legally left the school on my lunch hour, gone down, gotten a beer, drank the beer, and come back to school. And I'm sure that my principal would not have been happy, but it would have been legal. Where if an 18-year-old did that now, the principal's going to lose his job, the bar's going to be closed, and a couple of teachers are going to get fired. So I want you to keep an eye on these numbers, because that's kind of what this presentation is about, how much happened and how fast. So in 1976, we had 103 breweries in the United States of America. Now remember, at one time there were 36 in the city of Buffalo. 36, 103. That's how bad it had gotten. They were all big factory breweries. Budweiser, Miller, Schmitz, Schlitz, Coors, all that stuff. And I hated that. I did not like those beers. So the first beer I liked was a 4-pack of Guinness Foreign Export Stout. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was worth my time. If I was going to spend my liver on something, it was going to be something that tasted good. So when I became a professional beer complainer, Betsy got me a homebrew startup kit as a gag gift when we got married. This was not it. This is not even worth talking about. But a plastic bucket, a can of malt extract, a little bottle capper, a bag of caps, some corn sugar, a little glassine envelope of whole hop flowers that were brown. So fresh ingredients were tough to find. Notice we're down to 92 breweries in the United States in 1981. There were not even 2 breweries per state on average. And in New York State, at that time, there was Cook's, Genesee, Miller, Budweiser, FX Matt, and Schaefer down in New York City. So there's 6 breweries in New York State. So now take it away from there, and there were entire states with 0 breweries in it. Now, let's fast forward to today. The average American lives within 6 miles of a brewery. Think of, you're averaging in South Dakota and Montana and Alaska and within 6 miles. What a change. In 1986, I would drive by this building. I saw tanks being put in. I said, I know what they're for. I had tended bar as a part-time job. I had been brewing beer for 5 years, and I went and applied for and got a part-time job. My wife was an engineer. I was an art teacher and graphic designer. I came to Buffalo to go to Buff State. So this part of town has been a big part of my existence in Buffalo for a long time. So I got a job there, worked there, bartender, night manager, brewer, floor sweeper. It's good training for owning a brewery because you wear a lot of hats. People were coming up to me at the bar on pretty much every shift saying, I hear you know how to make beer. I want to know about this. I want to learn about it. I want to hear about it. I want to talk about it. I want to know more about this beer thing because I hate grocery store beer, but I like what's going on here. So I started a home brewer club called the Sultans of Swig, which still exists, and it's where people go to learn about beer. 150 breweries in the United States in 1987, so it's starting to grow. The craft beer thing is starting to catch. So this was my friend Red, and we, on the way back from this trip to London, we were talking on the plane. We decided to go into business together, to make a brewery together. We went to brew pubs over there, we went to malting works. It was a pretty educational trip for a 6-day vacation. This is at the Lyon County Hotel, just down the road from the Mutton Malting Works. So on Friday, well tomorrow, we'll be brewing Aviator Red, and the base malt for Aviator Red, 21 years later, is still Mutton's malt. So it's the good stuff, it's worth it. It costs a little more, it's well worth it. So Red was unfortunately killed in a motorcycle accident in '95, so he never got to see the brewery open. But he was a good friend and a good partner. In Lyon County Hotel, they took pieces out of this to carbon date. It dates from 9/19. So it had been an inn, a place to gather and drink and eat and sleep and be safe for thousands of years before we got there. And that's Adnams Winter Warmer, which is delicious, and it still is. So in '93, I decided to leave Buffalo Brew Pub to work at one brewery while planning another one. Just didn't work with me. 446 breweries in the United States. So in '95, Red and I incorporated and started buying tanks and raising money. Friends kind of threw in their vacation money and their poker money, and $400, $1,000. Those are the kind of buy-ins that we got. And there's another brewery in town, and we were doing a roundtable discussion at the library, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And it's one of the younger brewers, and I was kind of telling this story, and someone prompted me to kind of tell it, that it's tough getting started in business in Buffalo back then. And I was determined to do it within the city limits, because there was a lot of noise going on in the 80s and 90s that, all the businesses are going to go away, the city's going to collapse, you can't open a business in Buffalo, everything's terrible in Buffalo. Like, baloney. You can do it. I'm going to prove it. I knew nothing about business. I was not a business owner. I did not have a business schooling. I just have a really hard head. I could probably pound nails into the floor with it. So this younger brewer is going, well, when people hear that we had $1 million budget to open this brewery, it's not like we had $1 million in cash. We had to do lines of credit and stuff. $1 million. The day we opened, I had $436 in my checking account, right? So $1 million. 858 breweries. So in '96, I did an internship at Niagara Falls Brewing Company over the border. Creveller Industries owned the brewery, and it was really nice. While you're talking to them about building new tanks and things, you can work in the brewery and get some real professional experience, really get a feel for some things. I like this malt, I don't like that malt. I knew a lot of that because I had been homebrewing for 15 years at this point. So I had some real experience. 1,149 breweries. 97, Red gets killed in a motorcycle accident. As you can see, he was an awful lot of fun, and he may have enjoyed a beer or two. This is the Sam Adams tasting room in Jamaica Plains. This is at a craft brewers conference that we went to, and this one's at the Wellington County Brewery in Guelph, Ontario, which is still exists. Oh, here we go. This is, we were talking about the cask before. This is a cask. So you've got this is a gravity tap, and then the bung is up here underneath his hand, and you can hook a tap with a line to the pump to pull the beer out. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Looks like a keg turned on its side. In '98, we have to go back. Federal government says, well, he's on the paperwork. You got to turn everything in. So to tear everything apart, any money that we had to give it all back to the investors. His estranged mother came in and tried to sue us for wrongful death. I didn't buy him the motorcycle. But the lawyers say, pay her the money. She just wanted every penny that was in the checking account. Pay her the money. It's cheaper than my retainer fee. I love lawyers. 1,514 breweries operating in the United States. 99 through 99 and into 2000, reincorporate, relicense, no money to speak of. This is the same brew house that we still use. These tanks are stainless steel tanks. This is redwood stripping on the outside. They were our original fermenters. This is Woody 1, this is Woody 2. Woody 1 has gone to the great tank beyond. So we still have the redwood, and we've made picture frames. We'll make some tabletops and things out of that. This stainless has been recycled. So this was our retail area. So on Ontario Street, we could, if you came in, and some of you had, you could have a little cup of up to 3 ounces of beer, and you could have up to 3 of those samples, and then we had to say, thanks for coming, see you later. That was the law in New York State at the time. You could buy a growler to go, you could buy a keg to go, but you could only have up to 9 ounces of samples for free. You couldn't sell them, because I know how you get on 9 ounces of beer. Right? You get all out of control and everything, and then we have to call the police. So in 2014, fast forward, we get the Craft Act passed. So all that lobbying has paid off over time. Probably spent more traveling to do the lobbying than I actually saved. 1,564 breweries in the United States. So these are the 2 beers that we started with. Light bodied, yellow, easy drinking beer. Brew it to drink it in about 3 weeks. Irish red ale, about 2.5 weeks. We still make this all the time, mostly just for draft. We don't package it all the time like we used to. This one is now called 716 Kolsch. People just didn't understand the connection between the Curtiss-Wright planes, the Dawn Patrol. They flew in the Dawn Patrol during wartime, and they just didn't get it. So 716 Kolsch, that's the style of beer. By 2002, I'm still mostly a one-man shop, and I had lots of friends. They'd come in and help me with those little retail. Like we were open for 4 hours on Saturday. They'd come in and help fill kegs and fill growlers and talk to people, and people really liked that. Even back then, before you could buy a pint and hang out, the friends who had invested, they didn't just invest with their vacation money, they invested with their heart and soul. And that's part of what's kept us going for 21 years. There were lots of opportunities to say, I'm done, but you can't. So I made a deal with my wife that once I hit 100 hours in a week, I would just go home. So there were more than a few weeks, and any of you who've had your own business, you know how this goes. Go to work on Monday morning, and somewhere after about 2 a.m. on Thursday night, Friday morning, I would go home at the end of day 1, sleep for about 4 hours, and then go back Friday mid-morning for day 2. So I was only working 3 days a week. Now I only work on days that end with a Y. I take all the other ones off. But again, notice 1,500 breweries in the United States of America in a relatively short time. 2004, we had some great financing. First Niagara did some really good aggressive business programming. And there was a branch right up here at Hinman and Elmwood. And there was a guy there named Mike Welch and another guy named John Rossi. And these guys came up with a lease-to-own program, dollar down, dollar buyout. So you give them a US $1 bill and sign up. What you signed for was if you missed a payment by 10 days, you're not getting a phone call. Somebody comes in and takes those tanks out. Sure, they're going to bring a forklift in and take the tanks out. But we made all our payments. We were done. You're all done. Thanks very much. Here's your last $1. So that's how we added our first 2 40-barrel tanks that really helped us expand the amount of beer that we could make as we were getting more accounts. And again, it was handshake deals, delivering it myself, brew it, keg it, filter it, deliver it, and not sleep. 1,485 breweries in the United States. In 2006, we get a little tabletop bottling machine that would fill 6 bottles every 15 seconds. Fast forward, the bottling machine we have now does 480 cases an hour. It's a little faster. But Bottling, we're able to negotiate a contract with Try It Distributing. They're still our distributor 15 years later. That got us into Wegmans. And this Wegmans over here, there's a guy named Charlie Gainey. And Charlie, look, you guys, this craft beer thing, you got to pay attention. Well, we'll do a little section here and Try It Distributing. Charlie had a little dairy cooler set near the beer section, which was a lot smaller then than it is now. And it was one of those little dairy coolers with the two doors that open up. That sat in the same place for 1 solid year. And it would get stocked, and it would just, Aviator Red was the only thing we were bottling at the time. And that really, more than anything, that lifted us into the market. Bottled beer, oh, Flying Bison, oh, they're local, oh, hey. That's really how that went. And it was just a guy who believed in us, and he's now prepared foods manager for about 6 of the stores. Charlie's really worked his way up in Wegmans. He's the real deal. He's an awfully nice guy. So commodities, so grain and hops are purchased by larger breweries in yearly contracts, 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year contracts. I'm going to buy so many tons of this pale malted barley. I'm going to buy so many 100 pounds of this variety of hops. We were too small for that. So your spot market, whatever the price is, that's what you're paying. So in 2008, New Year's Eve, I went to bed paying 42 cents a pound for malted barley and about $1.75 to $2.25 for a pound of hops. Not knowing this, New Year's Day, when I wake up, hops are $19 a pound. Grain had gone to 78 cents a pound. So that was the I don't know what they call it, not depression, but recession, big recession of 2009, big world recession. And again, the picture I showed you before of the hops, that was in 2009. It's not that there weren't enough hops. There wasn't a shortage. The big breweries were trying to squeeze out the small breweries. They tried to legislate us out of business. They tried to put laws in to block small breweries coming. They tried to hoard to keep small breweries from coming. We're just too stupid to quit. So on we go, 1,653 breweries. So we're having big financial problems. A bigger brewery from New England took a pass at us at the request of our distributor, and they came in and said, okay, so we'll shut you down, we'll sell off your equipment for scrap, we'll fire all your people, we'll take one of your brands, we'll brew it, we'll put you on as sales manager for about 6 months or so, and we'll see how it goes. What do you say? Would anybody in this room say yes to that? So I called Nick Matt at FX Matt Brewing Company, Saranac Brewery in Utica, and I said, does this sound right to you? And he says, well, you're having financial problems. And I had almost that much pride at that time. And I said, well, makes you think we're having financial problems? Well, because you're making less than 10,000 barrels of beer a year. Anybody who's making 10,000 barrels is about to close. So you want to talk? So the following Friday, I drove down. I met his nephew, Fred, who's now the president of the brewery. And we came up with a deal to kind of keep Flying Bison on the road. We came up with a nice partnership deal. The simple story is they make our big batches, which is Rusty Chain. We make their small batches. And then they also have a similar agreement with Lake Placid, where they do the bigger batches of Ubu and what's the other one they have? But the bigger batches, and distribute them into Virginia and Rhode Island. And so we're still just Western New York. But all the equipment that you saw in those pictures at the brewery is not enough to make make Rusty Chain for Buffalo. So it's our #1 brand, still with a bullet, even some years later. So we make small brands for Lake Placid, especially the canned stuff. We now have a canning line that does 12s or 16s. And all their Cool Dude 16-ounce can brands, we're doing the Lake Placids and we're doing the Saranac stuff. So that's helped our bottom line quite a bit. So through 2011, we ran parallel companies. Two of our investors, we had 35 people that had put up money to help open Flying Bison Brewing Company over the first 4 years of our being around. As we were starting to exercise this partnership agreement, they wanted $1 million buyouts. They said, well, there should be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, you guys know where we are, you know what you're doing, you've seen the financial statements at the annual investors meetings. There's just not that kind of money. Wow.
What, your investors wanted the $1 million buyout?
Two of them, yeah. 33 are going, yeah, friends, let's keep going. We want this brewery, let's keep going. These two people were able to get lawyers who never got paid. And they went with 4 different law firms. We went to state Supreme Court 4 different times. They filed 16 charges, 4 each time. They were 0 for 16. We were 16 and 0. And the last, I wish I had it on tape because I could listen to it every day, where the judge is just saying, look, I don't know where you got these lawyers from, but if we get any charges coming up in this court, anything comes through here, I'm telling you, if they don't file harassment charges against you, as a judge, I will file harassment charges against you. That's how ridiculous it had gotten.
I
So,
thought they paid your legal fees.
no, we paid our legal fees. By the way, when I left the brewery, the guy that was our lawyer is over there having a pint of Fini now. So 2,000 breweries in the United States. In 2013, we fully partnered with FX Matt. It's been a really nice partnership. The industry is very volatile, so to have kind of a big brother advisor with, I mean, they own this building. They've owned this building since 1888. So these vessels, these are both boiling kettles. These vessels were put in 72 or 74, I forget. But these big windows are here because they had to open this corner of the building to bring these in. And what you're seeing here is a 500 barrel kettle. 2/3 of it is below the floor. So it's pretty cool when you go there. If you're a beer geek, I mean, that's just 3,000 breweries in the United States of America. Remember, we were starting at 103. So in 2014, a couple of momentous things happened. We move out of here because the building had been sold. We were looking to rent a little more space because we were starting to expand, and the building had been sold to Duval Safety. So I called the guys at Duval one day. They rented about 80% of the building. We had about 20%. I said, I've tried calling the landlord, and I'm not getting a hold of him. If you guys talk to him, I mean, I'm mailing the rent checks, he's cashing me. He goes, well, he's not the landlord anymore, and that explains why we haven't gotten any checks from you, because we bought the building 6 months ago. Okay, so let's talk about some more space for me. No, actually, we bought the building so that we could send you packing, because we want the rest of the building, because our business is expanding like crazy. So they were very nice to us. We did month to month until they got to a point and said, okay, you got to go. By that time, we had secured a property, started construction on this. We started in February by knocking down an old garage building that was on the site, and then started digging in March, and it was a wet spring, so they just kept filling with water. So it was really April before we really started construction on this. So we started in early April, and we were brewing beer in this building by mid-September. So I think that's a world land speed record for building a building and getting equipment in it and getting it going. So, and again, the engineers and plumbers, our electricians and stuff from FX Mat are the guys that really, there's 3 guys in particular, and they were here 3 to 4 days a week for the better part of a year to get this thing done and get us off the ground and get us brewing there. So they've been great partners. The other thing that happened during this time was a piece of legislation passed called the Craft Act. And that said that a production brewery could sell a pint of beer in a licensed tap room. So you had to apply for an additional license, like $150, okay? You could make that back in a weekend, by selling a pint rather than giving away those little samples. So that's what's really given rise to the craft breweries, especially in New York State. And if you look at the number of breweries that existed before 2014 in the state, and now look at the number that exist between 2014 and now, it's a tidal wave. And even nationally, we're up to almost 4,000 in 2014. Spoiler alert, in 2020, by the end of the year, there were 8,316 breweries in the United States of America. It had more than doubled in 7 years. Crazy. So when we built this, we kind of hedged our bet. This is the production area behind these glass windows. This is the tap room. The Buffalo Bisons loaned us these tables so we could get our doors open and at least let people in. And when we were building this, we weren't sure that the Craft Act was going to pass. It didn't get signed until November of 2014, and we were already open in this address. But because it didn't pass until November, you have to have a 30-day cooling off period as you do for most legislation, so it didn't take effect until December 13th of 2014, 12, 13, 14. We had been friends with the Air Force 914th Airlift Group, so military time was no stranger to us. 3:16 in the afternoon was 15:16. So at 3:16 in the afternoon of December 13th of 2014, 200 people were in this room drinking a toast to 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So had that Craft Act not passed, this wall wouldn't exist. Packaging materials, equipment would be over here, and there'd be more tanks over here. We'd be more reliant on distributing. With the Craft Act passing, we're more reliant on the tap room. So you can come over and try our beers and then go to Wegmans, Consumers, Tops, wherever, and buy the beer to take home. So that's a formula that works really well for me. I really like meeting the people that like our beer. That's why I'm here. And Jason made me. So 2016, we had some 60-barrel tanks that are even bigger. 5,600 breweries in the United States of America. 2017, we had that bigger, faster bottling line. Almost 6,600 breweries in the United States. The numbers are just going up geometrically. 2019, and this is before COVID, so as you can see, there's more people in the tap room. People just seem to turn towards that tap room concept and get it, that you could come to the brewery and try the beer and hang out with your friends and meet the brewers and then, buy the beer. We still couldn't sell beer to go out of here. That took another year before that. We couldn't sell you a 6-pack to go. We could sell you a keg to go. We could sell you a growler to go, but not a 6-pack. So that was just a minor little stitch in the legislation that fixed it. But people wanted to come and hang out at the brewery pre-COVID. So COVID hits, and now you can't do anything. So this became our front door. This wall, we would come out the door here and greet the customers and sell them 6-packs, growlers, and then as of last year, cans to go. And then once we were allowed to have people on site around, but not inside the building. Around the corner, our lot is kind of L-shaped. There's a big stone parking lot, so we put up a 40-foot by 40-foot tent, got some picnic tables, and so for the last more than summers, we have it up. We have a big tent up about 9 months a year. So people can sit outside and get air, and they don't have to come inside. If they're uncomfortable, they're good. We've got the front patio, tap room, which exceeds all the air turnover specs that by triple. So that's us. So fast forward to the end of last year, where we're over 8,300 breweries in the United States of America. So from 103 to 8,300 in the same 50 states. In Western New York, from Batavia to Jamestown, there are now 38 breweries, plus 4 meaderies, plus 3 distilleries, and who knows how many wineries. I can't even keep track of that. So, you people drink.
Did you say eatery?
Yeah, meadery. So mead is a honey-based wine.
Oh, mead.
So it's honey mixed with a little water to a certain gravity, and then it ferments to somewhere between 6.5% and 14% alcohol by volume. So that's mead. So that's us. So,
Thank you, Tim. I think one of the sure signs of an excellent presentation is the desire to learn more. So we want to learn how great Flying Bison beer tastes.
let's go.
We'll do some rearranging of the.
Actually, we can just go right here if that's okay.
Oh yeah. You want?
I'll just set some bottles up here. All right. So I brought 2 beers this evening to try. I brought some EC200 Pilsner and some Oktoberfest, but I had to go to Wegmans across the street this afternoon to buy the Oktoberfest because we're out. It's all sold. So you're more than welcome to come and try some. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Good to see you again.
They're both lager beers, smooth, easy finish. So don't be shy.
You didn't have rice listed as a 5th ingredient.
I do not use rice. I do not use corn. I do not use potato starch. We do use a lot of stuff in beer now that I never thought we would. So flavorings, fruits, extracts, maple syrup. You've got to have cookie flavored beers and raspberry beers and all that, which that's not my wheelhouse, but you've got to do it. You've got to have it. If you don't, you are irrelevant. So we don't make a lot of them, but we make some of them.
What is the most popular flavor? Not flavor, but Pilsner, Lager, IPA. What's is there a number one?
Around the world, beer that calls itself Pilsner, but Labatt's will say a fine Canadian Pilsner. Part of that is true. It is made in Canada.
But so how about in Buffalo? Because I noticed IPA is very popular.
Yes. So when
This is
people
what I
talk
like.
craft beer, when you look in the craft beer department, everything calls itself an IPA now. So I was at Kohl's last night and there was a beer, and I wish I could remember exactly how the words go, but it was something like candy coated IPA fruit sour. Well, what the hell is that?
That sounds like anything I.
So IPA it stands for India Pale Ale. So as the Brits were shipping beer to India and everywhere else in the world, it was spoiling. They trial and error. Yeah, I'll take the empties just so I can find out how many more I have to open for you. And I have plenty more, so don't be shy. So they found out with trial and error that beer that was a little stronger, 6% or more, had a better chance of surviving. Beer that was a little more highly hopped, a little more bitterness, a little more hop flavor, hops are natural antibacterial, had a better chance of survival. So India Pale Ale. Now, there's lots and lots of beers. You've heard of milkshake IPAs. They have a lot of lactose and some sort of fruit flavoring or chocolate flavoring, artificial flavoring in them. So how does that be IPA? I don't get it, but they don't consult with me. When you get to that point, there's sort of 6 magic words, and you have to have one of them on your label to get your label licensed by the federal government. And it's lager, ale, porter, stout, pilsner. I'm sorry, I missed the 6th one. But India Pale Ale gives you that ale word. So even though it's kind of a sugary fruit beer, you put India Pale Ale, well, you're still going to get your label approved. Even though it doesn't taste anything like, the fruit lactose part doesn't taste anything like IPA.
I remember in the 90s when Sierra Nevada first came
Yeah.
out. It was like the hoppiest thing I ever had.
Yeah.
To drink it now,
Right,
are there any hops in here at all?
right.
Because it's like
So there's
so much hops in here now.
Right, there's a measurement of how much absolute bitterness is in the beer from the hops, from
IBUs.
IBUs, International Bittering Unit. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is 35. That's kind of the standard, so 35 IBUs. It's not uncommon to find 80 and 90 IBU beers out on the market. And it's at 50, your palate can't tell the difference between 50 and 55, 55 and 60, 60 and 70. It's more. That's really all you can measure is, oh, it's more. So why bother? You know, there's a lot of stuff I don't understand. They don't consult me.
So Canadian export ale, which I don't even know if you can buy in Buffalo anymore, I don't see it much.
Right.
What is that, that's not.
So
an IPA,
export-
it's a little hoppier.
Right, so export gets into that IPA thing, where to export the beer, so German Dortmunder lager is an export grade lager, so it's 6%. Canadian export, 5.5, 6%. So the more alcohol, the better it will hold up. So that's why, that's what export. So that, you've got some warning words. The Brits make a beer, in a bottle they call it pale ale, on cask they call it bitter. So bitter is about 3.25%, special bitter is about 4 to maybe 5%, extra special, so the more words, the stronger it gets. The same with imperial and double and triple, and when you see those things, it's just more booze and more booze and more booze.
Okay.
You can,
I used to ask for, before I knew what it was that I liked, I would ask for, what's your hoppiest beer?
yeah,
And then I realized it was IPA. By the way, I really like your IPA.
thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. We have a couple that we make over the course of the year. We have 716 IPA, which is more traditional West Coast, but that's all that Mutton's British pale malt, so it's got more backbone, it's got more body to it. And then the Juice Caboose is more the New Englandy style. It's not quite the wallpaper paste haze that a lot of them are, but it's a softer bitterness up front and more Southern Hemisphere tropical fruits in the hop flavors. So the winemakers, and in particular the French, have a word, terroir, that tells, that's the atmosphere where the plant, the food product is grown, grapes, hops, grain, squash, whatever, affect the flavor of what you're buying. Great illustration, there's a variety of hops called Cascade, and they're grown in the Pacific Northwest. And if you get those and put them in a beer, you've got so Sierra Nevada, pale ale, fair amount of Cascade hops. A very citrusy, orange rind, almost hint of grapefruit kind of flavor notes in that beer. That comes from those hops. Now take a root cutting from one of those plants, because that's how you propagate hops. So you cut a little piece of the root off and bring it here to New York State and grow it. Now, they'll still call it Cascade hops, but the flavor of those hops is going to be more like pink peppercorn. It's going to get a little more herbal. It's going to get less citrusy. So I think they should change the name when they change the area where it's grown, but again, nobody consults. That's why we buy hops from all around the world. So English hops have different smells and flavors than hops from Washington State. And they're different from hops from Australia. And they're different from hops from Poland. So really when it comes, and the same with grain. So pale malt grown in Wisconsin tastes different than pale malt grown in East Anglia, England. Tastes different than pale malt grown in Bavaria. It's really a global economy when it comes to making beer. You kind of have to buy malts from all over the world to have the complete palate to make your beers. So the single biggest beer drinking event in the world is Oktoberfest. Why wouldn't you make an Oktoberfest style beer if you're a brewer?
You mentioned that the flavor changes based on the location
Right.
of the hops.
Right.
Does weather affect it? Like, does grapes from year to year?
Exactly, and it's exactly the same thing. How much sun do they get? How much rain do
So
they
even
get?
within a steady region, from year to year, the hop profile may.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we buy hops, they look like rabbit food pellets. So those little pine cone flowers have been harvested, dried, compressed under -10 degree nitrogen chilled tubes into smaller tubes, smaller tubes, smaller tubes until everything binds together. And you've got no room in there for oxygen to get in and spoil those. So think about when you buy a rose at a store and you bring it home and it's gone in a couple of days. A hop flower would be the same. It would be gone in a couple of days. But if you take it and freeze it and compress it and put it into a bag and purge it with nitrogen and vacuum it, seal it, and keep it in the refrigerator, now you can keep it for years. So now we can get hops shipped in from all over the world and get those flavors we want. Tropical juice flavors from the southern hemisphere, citrus from the Pacific Northwest, floral from Germany, herbal from England, and combine those in any way that we want as brewers. And that's one of the brilliant things about brewing in the United States of America is it's great to go to other countries where they have a strong beer culture. Go to Munich, it's fabulous. I love going to Munich. It's incredible. Oktoberfest is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. There are 4 beers available. Well, in Oktoberfest season, there's Helles, pale yellow beer, Dunkel, which is a little deeper colored, amber to brown, Hefeweizen, wheat beer with the yeast still in suspension, and Fest beer. So in the springtime, that Fest beer is gone, so it's Bock beer. So you get 4 kinds of beer in Germany, which is fine with me. They're exceptional beers. I could drink them for the rest of my life. You go to Ireland, it's primarily Guinness, and you'll find some Smittix and some Sullivans, and that. But it's still kind of a 1 beer country. And you go to England, and there's lots of American beer influence where they're made with American hops, so American pale ale style. I think it's bad of them to try and give up their beer culture to try and be American, because they're doing it at the expense of things like Timothy Taylor Landlord Bitter and Worthington White Shield, and beers that inspired us to make beer. Yeah, please. Please. And sometimes that's a great thing, and sometimes the local brews just stink. I wish that I could tell you that every one of those 8,000 breweries in the United States is making great beer, and it's really inspiring and all that, but some of them just suck. They just do. They're not experienced, they don't learn, they just go, oh, this is awesome, dude, and they grow a big beard, and they put on a flannel shirt with torn off sleeves, and now they're awesome. They sell some of their beers for $24 for a 4-pack in some of the stores. I have never had one of their beers that I could pick more than that much of. I mean, that's me, but a lot of lactose, a lot of wheat, a lot of fruit flavorings. It's not beer. This is beer.
Did you say you make 3 IPAs?
At least. Yeah. So they're not always all available all the time, but over the course of the year, we have 716 IPA. That was our primary bottles, kegs out the market. The distributors want new. Everything's got to be new. So we took Juice Caboose, which we brewed occasionally. Now we brew that all the time. We've taken 716 that we brewed all the time. We brew it occasionally.
Oh, that's why I couldn't find it as much.
Correct. You can find it at the brewery frequently, not all the time, frequently on draft. We're working on doing a mixed IPA pack, and it's just, there's no guarantee what the mix is. Could be 2 716 and 1 Juice Caboose, could be 1 Monster, but all 4 beers will be IPA. Malted barley, hops, water, yeast. No fruit, no sour, no lactose, no, just real IPA. We're trying to work with the stores to find out on those kind of clips on the top, can we just put a sticker on there that's the UPC code to scan them and have them not scan the can, but scan the top. If they'll do that, this is a reality. If they won't do that, then we've got to come up with a box that's got holes in it so you can see what's in there. It adds another layer of cost, it adds another layer of labor, and that'd be troublesome. So if we can do that sticker on the cap, this could be a blast, because now we can brew all sorts of things. So we'll have a whole series of canned IPAs next year.
Isn't New York State trying to promote using New York State hops?
Yes.
Okay, is that?
No, the hops are very expensive to grow, especially in New York State. We had a not so sunny summer this year. So I know one of the hop farms just gave up the ghost this year.
Lockport.
Yeah, Bree and, God, what's his name? They were primarily a fruit farm, and it's her family's farm. And they lived out west somewhere, and they thought, cool, we'll come back and we'll take over the family farm, and it'll be awesome. We'll do CSA agriculture, and we'll grow some hops, and it'll be great. It's $10,000 to $12,000 an acre for the infrastructure to grow hops. You've got to put in irrigation, you've got to put in the poles, the cables, the grid work, the lines to the ground, the root stock, and you probably got 2 years before you've got a saleable crop. So it's even more expensive than starting grapes.
Yeah.
So you're better off growing wine grapes than you are growing hops.
Do you list the IBUs on your labels?
Most things, yeah. Not real relevant, no, 6.3%. Yeah, see, so in Oktoberfest, it's not relevant. People aren't looking for bitterness in Oktoberfest. But, no, not this one either. Because again, there's hop flavor in here, but not big bitterness. But anything that's IPA, yeah, you betcha. We put that on there because that's the badge of honor.
Yeah.
70 IBUs. Well, you can't taste the difference between 50 and 70, but it's on there.
My father-in-law worked for Iroquois Brewery for years, and then he went to Simon Pure.
Okay?
Shame on me, I don't know what he did.
Worked real hard. No, I mean, it's very manual work. It's hard
He
work.
said something about bottles one time. I don't know.
Sure,
I don't
bottle
know
shop.
what he did. I don't know.
So, I mean, the big job in the bottle shop is maintaining the equipment. So he was a mechanic, an industrial engineer kind of person. Chain drives and belts and counter pressure fillers, and there's a lot of moving parts. And it's dangerous, especially back then. In modern day, one of the guys at the brewery lost parts of 2 fingers in the labeling.
Working for a brewery, they got him into heaven.
God loves brewers.
So why don't breweries reuse bottles anymore? Like in the old
Because
days.
people spit in them, and they put their cigarettes in them, and they spit gum in them.
Put the lime in them.
Sure, yeah. When I interned at Niagara Falls Brewing Company, they had a bottle cleaner. The bottles are much thicker walls. So the thought now is to crush the glass and recycle it. About 15% of each bottle gets recycled, and then about 60% of each can gets recycled.
Yeah.
So cans are a more recyclable package. But with bottles, to clean them, the machine they cleaned it with, they had, the velvet rope, except it was plastic chain that was 6 feet away from the machine because some of the cleaning fluid would kind of spit, when things moved around. It would go through 2 cleaning cycles and then 2 rinse. So a cleaning, a rinse, a cleaning, a rinse. 185 degree caustic at pH 13.
Wow. 13.
So if it hit you,
It's gonna burn a hole.
it would be down to the bone before you knew you were hit.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 13.
So yeah. So no, thanks. No thanks. So even if that was allowed, I would not do it. It's just, those machines are freaking dangerous.
I remember when the bottles had a ring around them because they would be reused.
Right.
And, yeah.
And they would scrape
Yes.
against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you really want to have a kind of creepy experience about that, the next time someone hands you a bottle of Corona, just kind of feel the outside of it. And you'll feel a little bit of a sort of a sandpapery grit from all the broken glass.
Really?
Do you use the terminology 60-minute, 90-minute IPA or 70?
What that means is those beers were developed on a small tank pilot system, right? Barrel and a half, 2 barrels. We have a 1 barrel pilot system with 2 barrel fermenters. So we do 2 brews in a row and fill that. So the guy that owned the brewery, he had a guy brewing for him for a while. His name was Andy Tavikram. Andy started at Great Lakes Brewing Company in Cleveland. And then he went there, and now he owns his own brewery in Cleveland that's even smaller than us. So, but he gets to go home at night. So he came up with the idea, and there's always theories. Remember Zemergy, there's art and there's science. So there's all these different theories of science that this works and this works and this improves this and this doesn't and this. So there's all that going on all the time. So they came up with this idea. Remember the football game that we had when we were kids with the little plastic guys and the aluminum sheet that vibrated? So we put a box of hops on one of those things and turned it on. And it just, so over a 90-minute boil, so you crack your grain, you steep it in water, you run the liquid into the kettle, you bring it to a boil, and you turn this thing on, so over 90 minutes, there's just a handful of hops constantly dropping in over the course of 90 minutes. A boil for most beers is 60 minutes. So as you boil it for an extra 30 minutes, you're taking off more steam, which is water. So you're concentrating it, so it's going to be a little deeper color. So a little more concentrated sugar, which is going to ferment to a little more alcohol. And you've got all these hops in there. And then you go, so 60-minute IPA is about 6.5%. 90-minute IPA is closer to 8%. And 120 is 10.5%. So it's really hoppy barley wine at that point. And again, you've been warned. So the more numbers, the more words, the stronger. So be careful.
Very interesting,
Thank you,
thank you.
Well, thanks for coming out to play.
It was worth the wait.
Good to be in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.